Thank you for coming to the session right after lunch. It's usually the one time that most panelists or presenters don't want to be because everyone's tired. But I promise you, this will be definitely worth your time spent here because we're talking about something really important, which is how do you advance your career when you're not going to be involved in certification programs or further education or looking for opportunities at your workplace to really challenge yourself or maybe overcome some of the challenging work situations that you are in. And I was really excited and honored that the program committee selected our panel because when I talked to my panelists, we all sort of said, you know, this is really an important topic because many of us as women get out into the community and we just volunteer. We give back. This is part of what we do. However, we're not really looking at it from a lens of what does this do for our career. We're more looking at as it part of giving back. And we know a lot of organizations take volunteering about, you know, improving your sales potential, doing your networking, but really getting more in depth into what volunteering allows you to do to grow within your career, not only from your technical skills, but also from your non-technical skills. And as I was sharing with my colleagues earlier, a lot of the situations that come up in volunteering situations are things that you obviously need to work on, but you can't really work on them in your personal life because you're going to be endangering possibly some relationships. And you don't want to also work on them in your professional life because your boss is really not going to like it when you challenge him on things. But as I had yesterday, I had to challenge a coworker who was on a board with me, and we finally resolved sort of this butting heads that we had been doing for the last 3 years, and I really saw it as an accomplishment. So I'm going to have each one of our panelists introduce themselves, where they work, and some of the organizations that they were involved in, and then we're all going to talk a little bit about volunteering in general. How do you evaluate the volunteer opportunities you're going to do? What are some of the things to look out for, and what are some of the key career skills that you might want to think about learning? And then each one of the panelists is going to go sort of more in depth in some key areas, conference management, volunteering and presenting, and also being part of competitions. We also have on our panel a recruiter who is also very involved in the community and in volunteering, but her perspective is going to be, how do you present all of these skills? How do you present these life experiences during your interview process, on your resume, or on a LinkedIn profile? So without further ado, I'm going to start at the end with Yolka introducing herself and work this way. Yolka?
So my name is Yolka. I'm a principal software engineer at Framebridge, which is a startup in Georgetown, and we are working to disrupt the custom art framing space. I'm also the city organizers for Tech Ladies in Northern Virginia, and I am an active member of the Junior League of Washington.
And Kirsten?
Hi, I'm Kirsten. I'm the Director of Recruiting at Novetta, an analytics and cybersecurity company nationwide, mostly in the Intel space. My journey started with being an attendee at a conference that kind of led to somehow and being in charge of Car Hacking Village. So it's a long journey, but it just really is involved in infiltrating the community by being a volunteer, by making an impact, and by being involved in the relationships and the activities within the community.
Hi, I'm Cindy Jones. I am a senior principal consultant with Rapid7. They just changed my title, so which is a pretty major player in the cybersecurity space. I'm involved with a number of different security B-sides events, as well as having spent about 8 years on DEF CON Goon Squad. So I've been spending quite a bit of time out there.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sophia Fadley. I'm a cyber risk defense analyst for AIG, so basically incident response. I also co-founded B-Sides Nova, which is also another B-Sides conference that's local to Northern Virginia. I also mentor a group of high school and middle school students to play in different cybersecurity competition, as well as giving them some hands-on experience that will help them hopefully in seeking cybersecurity careers in the future.
And as Rhonda said, my name's Kathleen Smith. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of two job boards, one clearjobs.net and cybersecjobs.com. I am also on the National Planning Committee for the Women in Cybersecurity Conference. I am a member of many of the communities here in the Washington, D.C. area. I'm on the staff for B-Sides Las Vegas, the largest B-Sides security conference. I run their two-day higher ground career event. And finally, I'm the co-founder and president of Recruit DC, the largest recruiting organization in the Mid-Atlantic area. So as you can see, we're not talking about people who just do a little bit of volunteering on the side. We're talking about people who have really integrated volunteering into their lives and into their professional lives. I'm going to start with Sophia. So when you were looking at just volunteering in general, can you sort of share why you wanted to get involved in volunteering, and how did you evaluate your different volunteer opportunities?
Well, I'm a woman in cyber, and so for me, it was very important to support women. Obviously, we don't have enough women in the cybersecurity field, and we would like to bring some balance and diversity into the field. And so for me, initially, I went and I looked for a nonprofit organization that supports women. One of the first ones that I came across was WIT, Women in Technology. And that's how I kind of started discovering the whole volunteering and how to really, I didn't want to just volunteer, I wanted to support an organization. So WIT was a great place for me to start. However, it was in technology and it was broad, so I ended up finding another nonprofit that supported women specifically in the cybersecurity space. That organization is WIE Women, Society of Cyber G2. So that's how it started. And I enjoyed giving back and supporting initiative and basically just being part of something that's bigger than myself. For me, it was a great place to meet mentors, people that have done the work, and people that I can connect with and can give me great advice. It was a way to build my network as well. So when looking for opportunities, you have to see where you can come in and bring something positive to the message or to the mission. So supporting women in cybersecurity has been something that to me made sense for my career development, and that's how I go about choosing my opportunities.
So Cindy, you're involved in a lot of different activities and conferences, and people actually track you down and ask you for advice.
Yeah.
How do you manage with being a mom and a career and all of these opportunities which you're great at, but how do you evaluate which organizations you say yes to and which ones you say no to, and do you have an example?
I think the mom thing, my son just left for college in August, so that's that's a little bit of a lesser stressor right now. But when I first started getting into things, my goal was always I wanted to give something back. I had been a fly on the wall for so many years at these conferences and just absorbing, right? I was learning so much, and it was advancing my own personal, my own personal growth, taking that back to my employer. But I was doing a lot of taking, and that's just not natural for me. So after a while, it got to the point where I wanted to give something back, right? That whole giving back thing that Kathleen mentioned is part of, it's definitely part of my nature, but it took a little while for me to realize that. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer for some people. So be it. When I decided to go ahead and start volunteering and dedicating my time towards some of these activities, my goal was to figure out what the message was and what the goals were of the organization. So, for instance, with the B-Sides events, they started off as completely free programs, and they pretty much still are. I think there's a nominal fee to go ahead and be able to participate in one, because we don't have attendees at B-Sides, we have participants. We want everybody to communicate with us. So in order to participate with the B-Sides programs, they were meant to be either very low cost, we're talking, $30 or less to cover costs, and that it was actually about education and getting messages out there to help share intellectual information with individuals who normally wouldn't have access to this, and they don't have access to the larger conferences. So that was a big driver for me. Also, the ethos of the organizations, whether or not they were, that was the same. The message was going to be continued from that baseline of not charging people and having people come in. There would be quality speakers. They wouldn't be paying people to come and speak at their events. They would maybe have a single invitational choice to come in, but for the most part, it would be a community involvement there. Open call for papers, making sure that these individuals are being vetted and being who are subject matter experts. One of the advantages of being in a B-Sides group is that the groups are usually small enough to where you can challenge the speakers, hopefully with a little bit of decorum, but that you have that ability to go ahead and say, hey, how large the events were. Also wanted to make sure that they were small enough to where those conversations could take place off the stage or wherever the case may be. So those were kind of some of the thoughts that I had in mind.
So I'm just going to jump over to Yolka for a minute. And so Yolka, you have been involved in a variety of activities with Junior League. You've been there for a while. You've started with some new groups. How did you pick Junior League, and why did you pick Junior League?
My boss suggested it.
Oh, okay. As a mentoring opportunity or as something to complement your work experience?
As an opportunity to get experiences faster that I wouldn't be able to get in my job itself. She was a member. She had been a member for quite a while and had great things to say about it. And I joined with the intention of working on committees with budgets and managing people. And then I ran away screaming from those parts. I didn't feel productive. I felt like I was wasting my time in committee meetings every week. And so instead I focused on the in-community opportunities that they had. And one of the things Junior League does really well is setting you up with places to go where you're actually going to be used for an event, and your time isn't wasted. And even in those, there were a lot of opportunities for leadership. I found myself jumping in where people weren't making decisions or didn't have ideas and solving problems. And it gave me a safe environment to be more comfortable with, basically being bossy with strangers, but politely. It is a Junior League, very polite. And another thing that the Junior League does really well is social events. And so even from my very first provisional year, I had to plan social events. I'm an introvert. It was really tough for me. I couldn't get out of it. And that has helped me a lot with Tech Ladies, because now, 12 years in, I can plan a happy hour or a meeting like that. There's no stress. I have done this dozens of times. And it's really easy to put those events together to build the Tech Ladies community. And fundraising. Another thing we do at the Junior League is asking people for money or donations for auctions, which I hate doing. I dread it every time, but it is easy. And it's made it very easy for me to reach out to people and say, hey, can we have your space for this meetup? Or will you sponsor this and buy us alcohol for all the ladies? And so it's helped in that arena as well. And I did eventually take a leadership position. I found a committee, a fundraiser that I really liked, a rummage sale, where I felt really productive. And it was a great group of ladies who would roll up their sleeves, get their hands dirty literally with rummage, and have a great sense of humor about it. And so I joined the committee, and my first year I took the biggest non-leadership role on it, managing the clothing sections of our rummage sale. I say rummage sale, it's 20,000 square feet, so it's huge. And it is our biggest fundraiser, bringing in about $160,000 with just a $10,000 investment. So it's a lot of work over 2 months. But so I took on clothing, and then the next year I took the leadership position of being a co-chair for all of the rummage. And this year I'm rising treasurer and learning about how the Junior League manages money, and actually finding it really interesting. That committee has not drove me away screaming yet.
That's great.
And I've been able to apply some of that in work as well. Learning to ask people for things and not being as terrified of their answer got me a title bump in my last negotiation for a job. I went from being a senior software engineer to a principal, and I've been doing this for 12 years. I've never worked with a female principal software engineer ever. So that felt like a huge win for me, and I got it because I learned how to ask and not worry too much, as well as how to sell it, because they wanted recruiting and they wanted me speaking at conferences, which I also do a lot of, and that title helps me be taken more seriously in those situations, and it is appropriate for how long I've been doing this and my technical knowledge.
Great. So Kirsten, as a recruiter, I know in the 17 years that I've been in recruiting that some people put volunteering on their resume or they'll put it on their LinkedIn profile, but a lot of people say don't put it on. What do you as a recruiter see, how do you evaluate volunteering? Do we talk about it enough? Do we not talk about it enough? What do you use volunteering as a way to evaluate someone if you're going to contact them for a job or not?
People don't put it enough on their profiles, on their resumes, and they don't even necessarily mention it in their interviews enough. And I've found that, that women are less likely to wave their own flag as men are. We just naturally take on so many extra things at the same exact time. We can drive down the road and type an email and breastfeed all at the same time if we have to, and that's amazing. And that's multitasking, that's a skill. But I've actually noticed, and I first took on my first kind of mentoring or coaching, if you will, activity through something that you organized. I ended up, it happened very organically, and now I participated in it at DerbyCon and a lot of other conferences. And while I'm coaching people, and I've found that the veteran community and women in engineering community needs a little extra push when you're saying, hey, let me help you as I start this conversation, and I say, tell me about things that aren't part of your job duties. Tell me about things that you're doing, that you're volunteering, or that you're doing that you don't have to do, and you find out a lot more about their personality and their skills and their abilities in those conversations, and then you help them articulate it into a resume and so forth. So it's something that I naturally look for as I, and you've heard me say this before, it's the human approach. It's treating the human like a human and not just like a skill set. When you help them identify, oh, I didn't even realize, like I was so excited listening to you describe what you were doing, and I'm sitting there in my head, it's clicking a bunch of bells. When I hear her say those things, I'm like, she's so organized, she's a good leader, she's a good problem solver, just as I listened to her describe what she was saying. And she didn't use those keywords, but those are all keywords that she should have on her resume, just based on what she was describing that she had done.
So do you, most of us are told that on a resume, it's only 2 pages and you only list your work experience. How would you have someone list their volunteering? I mean, what I've seen primarily is that people will just say, besides Nova, Junior League, something like that. Should they separate it out, their sort of key responsibilities, if they're leadership or
Absolutely, absolutely. And I tell people to if you blog, I want to read it if it's a technical blog, if it's on GitHub or something like that. I say, did you write anything? Did you participate in any? You know what I really love to tell the college students in particular? What did you participate in and fail? What contest were you doing and it didn't work out? And what did you learn from that? So I love to hear about all that stuff, especially the competitions and things like that, because it's very important to show your ability to take on a task like that. And what did you learn from it? So I actually tell people to put that stuff on their resume, and then I kind of help them do that.
So I'm going to delve a little bit deeper into some key volunteering. And Sophia, I wanted you to sort of maybe talk a little bit about, you've mentored girls in doing competitions. I know you've done some of your own competitions. For those of you who don't know, I mean, has anyone in the room been part of a competition that's been at a conference? sort of a capture the flag or a wireless capture the flag. So some people. So these are opportunities at conferences, meetups and such to really work on your technical skills. But they're also something that I notice is an ability to work on your team building, and also an opportunity to work in sort of a pressure cooker, that you're not, you know, your boss is not looking over your shoulder, but you're in a pressure cooker kind of situation. But there are hundreds of them. They're online, they're offline. Some of them are IoT, some of them are security, some of them are Wi-Fi. How have you evaluated which competitions you've been part of or the people that you've coached? And what are some of the key non-technical skills that you have learned through that?
So like you mentioned, there's many different competitions. They all focus on different things. They're all organized differently. One of the key things is there's individual capture the flag is what we call in cybersecurity. We call them capture the flag because you're trying to go through directories and find flags. But there is individual where you can just go and you're playing against the computer. And there's also team competition. So in our last conference that was done this past February, we had a CTF, team-based CTF. So what we did is we put out the call, many people applied as teams, and those that didn't apply as a team, we put them in team. So when you work, and we did that ahead of time where they were able to work with each other. So, I mean, you need a lot of different skills to be able to participate in a CTF. The cool thing about being in a team and being organized where you start planning it ahead of time is each one of you can focus on an area of expertise or of interest. So that way it takes away the stress of having to know everything. So for those who are interested in tackling something like that, I would advise Team CTF. The other thing is you get to work with people sometimes that you don't know. So you develop certain, relationship networking opportunities. So it's all about being able to work as a team. And so this year what we're doing, we have our sponsors, CTF, and what we're doing, we're leaving 2 spots. So we can match the company and we can throw in 2 individuals. And that could be an opportunity for a job later on where you worked with the team, they like you, they say, hey, you know what, why don't you apply? There's a job here. So those are opportunities that you would look for to network, but also to kind of work on your own skills. We're also doing something that I think hasn't been done enough is CTF for people who've never participated in CTFs before in competition. A lot of people are scared from going into this and kind of embarrassing themselves. That's what everybody in their head think. But when you label it as a competition for noobs or for people who haven't done it before, I think it kind of facilitates things for people and lower the barrier to entry. Yeah. So for me, Team CTF are very valuable, but in the technical field, there's a lot of introverts that like to work on themselves and work by themselves. So there's the individual, competition as well. But this is something great that people can put on their resume that substitute for experience. This is the ongoing problem is, well, I don't have experience, and the employer is not willing to take me and train me. But okay, we understand that problem, but what are you doing to get yourself hands-on experience? Education, unfortunately, does not provide enough time to work with tools, open source tools, and do things that you would do in a SOC. And with SOC, I mean a Security Operations Center. Those usually are entry-level jobs in cybersecurity. But so these are things that you could do to substitute for that experience. I did this CTF. We came in as a second team, second place. I've done this. There's also numerous competitions out there. So there's what we call blue teaming competition. And what I mean by that is defense. All you do is you defend your network and you find vulnerabilities, you patch them. So there's blue teaming and red teaming, but like Cyber Patriot. is a competition that targets especially high school students, middle school, high school students, and it offers opportunities for these students to really have some real hands-on experience and put it on their resume and go after internships or even jobs. There's also the National Cyber League, which is a great, for $25, you get access to their gymnasium, and again, there's so many skills that you work on. I mean, forensics, blue teaming, so you really touch on many different skills that you can go and talk to on your job interview that kind of help you with that. At the end of the day, if a recruiter have 2 resumes and one shows that you've done things like this and one shows, even though if you have the same level of experience, they'll probably go with the one that tried a little bit to acquire that experience.
So what's interesting is that I have absolutely no technical skills. I'm a marketer, but I really love going in and just watching the competitions. And what's interesting is when I mentor students who are maybe in policy or in healthcare or energy, and they're looking to get into other fields like cybersecurity by applying their knowledge of healthcare or energy or pharmaceuticals, I always say go to a competition and offer to run and get coffee. I mean, just sit there beside someone, and I have learned so much. I know how to program in C, but that's it because I'm old and we did the index cards in the early 70s. So being able to go back and say, okay, you've been looking at this screen for 6 hours, what are you learning? And once you're engaging with someone who is talking about their expertise, you're giving them the opportunity to share. And it's really been some of the most gratifying experiences for me to sit through a competition and say, I have absolutely no idea how to find the flag. I look for the thing at the top of the pole that's waving back and forth. What is it in here? And everyone was more than willing to explain it to me, not be scared or anything like that. But Kirsten, how do we talk about being in a competition on a resume, or do we talk about it more in the interview when we're looking for examples to share?
So I want to say that the people who win and compete in the NCCDC every year, we were just talking about this in San Antonio, they have jobs when they're sophomores. They have full-time jobs at Microsoft and Raytheon and wherever they want to work, and they have job options long before they graduate just for winning. And the other participants as well, but definitely the team that wins and goes to the White House, they're all set. And schools like MIT and like RIT and like South Florida, they have their own hackathons that they're doing. I think almost all of them do it, so it's almost irresponsible for them to not do it at this point. And they're coached by their career offices at school to put those things on their to get involved in the clubs, to put those things on their resume, and they put it right at the top now. Mm-hmm. So the recruiters in our space, in engineering space, expect you to be participating in something. You're in some kind of a club, you're in Nova Hackers, or you're involved in something and you're showing. It's almost an expectation now. You're showing, I can work on a team, I can solve problems, I can compete. Life's a competition, and you have to show that you can be a part of it.
The other thing that's great about competitions is that you're in a real work-life situation. People are like, oh no, it's just getting to the end of the day, who wins, who doesn't. But when you're looking at a competition, it is just like a work problem. It is, something has gone wrong. You've got to work with people that you've never worked with before. You have to establish a chain of command and who's going to communicate, and you have limited resources and you have limited time. Does that sound like anyone's normal work day? So if you don't have actual experience, but you have done something in a competition, you then have an experience to share with a recruiter or a hiring manager. I was really surprised when I started attending competitions and people are like, oh yeah, I do like 6 or 7 competitions a month. I've been doing them for 15 years. I was like, and you're still a junior SOC analyst? And they're like, well, yeah, no one wants, I don't have the experience. And I said, you have years of experience because you have put yourself out there doing the competitions. You need to start talking about that more. I want to switch it over to Yolka and talking a little bit about presenting. So, you know, what's interesting is when you look at the headlines about that there's not a lot of women in our industry, you don't see a lot of women who are presenting. Presenting is a whole process in of itself, and that's one way that Yolka and I met, and I'm going to turn it over to Yolka to tell her story.
Yes, so this year I started speaking at conferences. It was a long time coming. My boss and our head of marketing and the product manager I worked with had all been pushing me to for over 2 years. It took them a long time to get me to actually start submitting to calls for proposals. And it has been quite a ride. The first step is writing up an abstract and a title, and then finding CFPs. There's lots on Twitter, there's websites that list them out, and start submitting. And I found that it's quite a numbers game. Anyway, I made an outrageous goal this year to speak at 12 conferences, and I didn't think I was going to make it. All 3 of those people who had encouraged me had left the company, and my new boss wasn't as encouraging. So I thought that goal was just going to, the year was going to pass by and I wasn't going to make it. But somehow I did. This is number 12 for me this year.
Woohoo!
I had a lot of support early on from my company because they were interested in outreach through these conferences. They were very interested in appearing more friendly to developers and getting more attention from developers. And so I had a very easy time getting both time off, it counted as work time, to attend conferences as well as write the talks, which is a lot of time. I spend 40 to 80 hours on a talk. The nice thing is you can reuse them though. So I have one that I've given 6 times so far, and conferences still love it. Some conferences really want a unique talk, and others like repeat talks because they know what they're getting and they know you've actually gone up in front of people and done it before. So it's a lot of time.
How do you engage your employer, and do you, so one thing that I have noticed in conferences is that there are some people like yourself who are representing the company, but you obviously had to get a lot of help, you had to negotiate. How did you go through that process? Because as you said, I mean, I'm right now submitting proposals for next fall. It's a long timeline, but then there's all that negotiation, and there are a lot of people who choose not to do that. So can you talk a little bit about that?
So I had conversations with my manager early on. I had it a little bit easier since they were the ones pushing me to do this. But we did discuss that time at conferences would be work time, whether I was speaking or sticking around to listen, that travel time was work time, and that they covered the costs. I got some very interesting trips out of it too, which I probably wouldn't have taken otherwise. One thing I would do is every time I got an email from a conference saying, hey, we want you to speak, I'd let my manager know before I accepted and run that by them. So when the priorities changed, the new manager said okay to a couple and then started saying no. So I hadn't committed to things that then would have been outside of work. Recycling those talks also helps. A lot of conferences really like it, but it makes it a lot less work on you. And now that I'm at a small startup that doesn't have a budget for this kind of thing, I pay a lot more attention to conferences that will actually cover my costs. So this, for 2018, I'm only speaking at conferences that are either local or that are going to cover my costs to go travel to them. And there are actually quite a lot out there, and it's becoming more and more popular, especially because they want to bring in more diverse speakers, and oftentimes those speakers can't afford to go fly to Iceland to speak for the weekend.
And I'm glad to hear that you're experiencing that conferences are paying travel expenses. In my experience, it's actually been the reverse. Yeah. There's been this very interesting trend for some conferences to actually charge the speakers fees and so on. So I'm perplexed with that, but I think it changes dependent on the conference. It's also really important to have a conversation with your marketing department, your corporate communications department as to, you know, how do you want me to represent the company? I'm going to represent myself, but what are some of the key taglines? What are some of the key words that I need to watch out for? Things like that, because you don't want to be that person that got caught off guard by, saying our company's favorite color is blue when, the CEO hears it and finds out, no, the company's favorite color is green, and you didn't know that. It's really nice to engage your corporate communications department and your marketing department, because they can probably help you with filling out the proposals. They can help you create your slide deck. I love creating slide decks and putting GIFs in them and images and stuff, but sometimes that can be very time consuming. So really engaging with your manager and your corporation as far as, or who you work with, as far as what they want to represent. But also realize, Yolka had a very aggressive goal of 12 presentations in a year. I think 6 is probably a more usable amount, even though I'm going for 17 next year.
I think balance is really important
yeah,
to take
the
into
balance
account
is,
too. I'm not
yeah.
too good at that, but I'm working on it.
Yeah, well, that seems to be something that all of the panelists are not good at, balance. Balance. Speaking of balance, can we go over to, or actually, Kirsten, you want to talk a little bit about publications and articles and presenting at conferences? How does that fit into when you review someone's resume? What do you look at?
So I realize that depending on the type of business that you do, excuse me, in your customer base, you probably do have to have things scrubbed or blessed, or going through your marketing department. That was an excellent point. Just make sure that you can talk about the stuff that you're wanting to talk about. But the question is, how should people?
So I notice on some resumes that are 15 pages long, they list, every single abstract that
Right.
they've written or every presentation that they've made. What is a great way that someone can convey that they're a frequent presenter, or that they participate in a lot of publications? I mean, is it a one-liner? Is it a short paragraph?
You're going to have to pick your favorites and prioritize, and probably keep it as a living element in your profile that you update according to what's going on at the moment. And people don't like to hear this, but sometimes you do have to customize what you're presenting based on what you're trying to sell about yourself. You're your best advocate of yourself, right? So it shows a good understanding of your knowledge of your own, being your best advocate. How do I fit into this situation? And I know about you, the employer, or the opportunity, and I'm going to speak to what I've done based on what I think you're looking for, or what you're doing in that situation. In some cases, when I'm creative sourcing, I will, start at the very, there's a shotgun approach and
When you're
more of a sharpshooting, right? So I will sometimes look for, well, who's speaking at these events, right? They may not even have a profile. They may not ever mention that they've done these things, but I'll start with who's speaking at these events, DEF CON, Black Hat, whatever, who's there, and then I'm spending more and more time focusing actually on B-sides. I found that they're, honestly, they're becoming a lot less corporate and a lot more legitimate. Actually, because I'm not in sales, and you know what I mean. Oh, yeah. And then I'm looking at, well, what conversations are they involved in, and who's following them, and who are they following, and let me look at their Twitter feed, and let me see what they're talking about and what their activities are. And that's a lot more showing really what those people are involved in, and who's listening to them and what are they talking about, as opposed to what they might never put on their resume.
Yeah, there's who is your persona, what is your subject that you're really great at talking about, and as we have found, a lot of people don't put that on their resume. They don't put that, I contributed an article to the company blog on a specific technology. I have contributed to the newsletter for, my local community organization. One of the reasons why you want to share that is writing skills and presenting skills are still very strong skills that people are looking to hire, because as you're looking at advancement, you are constantly going to be put in front of other people to present ideas, to persuade them, and you need to be a good speaker and also a very good writer to be able to do that. Well, you know, back in my day, we used to submit writing examples whenever we submitted a resume. Well, you don't do that now, but you do, you know, submit that, hey, I've been part of a publication, I presented, I am going to be able to get up in front of the board of directors and explain why we need that extra $100 to buy pens for the next year, something like that.
And real quick, I'm almost always in recruit mode, but when I'm just listening to the panel talk, I don't even know if they realize, I'm hearing them say, well, I started this thing, I started this thing, I started that thing. That's a leadership thing that you've done. You know, that's a mentoring thing that you've done. That's a coaching thing that you've done. And if you're not articulating that in your profile, you know, that's the kind of thing that you would naturally find out in a conversation with people, and you say, really, you started that? That's great. Why isn't that on your resume? So it's good to identify those things too.
So Cindy, let's talk about all of the different conferences and events that you've managed, and you know, you are the go-to person for registration, for conference. But I want you to talk about, you know, so you manage all these conferences. How have you challenged yourself, and what have you learned, and how do you handle burnout?
Okay, we'll start at the beginning of the questions. We'll lead up.
And
we'll,
in
we'll
20
lead up
seconds
to
less.
the burnout part.
No.
Because let's
Yeah.
face it, that's what I'm really good at, is ignoring the burnout. So we'll just put it off for a little bit. So with all the conferences that I'm a part of, that I have various management roles in, as well as the elevated role that I currently have within my company, I think some of the best skills that I've learned in running these things is I'm learning a lot of negotiation skills. Dealing with and working with, I shouldn't say dealing with, that sounds negative, working with alternate objectives for anybody from our sponsors to our speakers to the caterers. They've all got their own objective. This is where they want to go with this. This is why they're doing it. And trying to understand that and understanding more about these people and groups of people. I'm fortunate that I have a background. I had no engineering background whatsoever. When I was in school, I was a psych major. I fell into IT, which evolved into the security space. So I had, the communication aspects I'm pretty solid with. I can get people to talk to me and tell me things about themselves and hopefully be able to glean some information out of that. But being able to continue that into a negotiation phase was very difficult for me when I first started. It's gotten much better. I'm very pleased with that. Something else that I think I've gotten out of it, managing the nebulous deadlines. We know the day of the conference, but going ahead and leading up to that and doing project management when you're dealing with other entities that are absolutely undependable. That is a skill that I never thought I would need because I didn't think it was a reality. You discover that very quickly when you're running a conference.
Crisis management.
I am in what-if mode every minute of every day because of this experience. Let me tell you, I can go ahead, and my mother-in-law was giving me a hard time about it over the holiday a couple weeks ago. She was like, why are you always what if? I'm like, I can't stop myself. It's bad, but it ends up being a great show. You know, the day of the conference or whatever the case may be, it's going to be a good show, and I'm the only one that's going to see the negative, we hope, right? That's the goal, is the knock on wood there. So the burnout part.
Because
so-
you've had to say no to some people, and
I
you've
have.
not, you know, and are you saying no more, or are you?
So funny you asked that. During the course, I was doing some research to find out about my company. My company is spectacular, and they support me in all of my volunteer efforts. Literally every single thing that I want to volunteer for. We have unlimited PTO with my company, so that's wonderful. But they're actually looking forward for me being the face of the organization. I work for Rapid7, and they're out in the community. So I'm very lucky in that regard. So I wanted to go ahead and talk to them and find out exactly what it was that, you know, spurred them to get so involved with community. And during the discussion, the topic of burnout came up. And I said, you know, I was speaking to the head of my HR department, and I said, so, I'm curious, do we have any resources available to us to help us? We don't always go to our bosses, or our bosses are to be like, yeah, as long as you get your work done, it's fine. Do we have anybody we can go ahead and talk to? We have any kind of part of the organization that can help us determine when we're overstepping ourselves and how to learn some skills and get a tool set together to rein ourselves back in? And she says, we don't. That's a really good idea. Would you be interested in leading up that charge? And so because my volunteer spirit is trying to kill me, I took that on as well. So now I have a whole new project to deal with at work. But that's notwithstanding. I still find it difficult to say no. It's really great for me when I have a straight out conflict on my calendar. Can't do it, I'm out of town. That's the best scenario I can come across. Yeah, exactly. It's just wipe the sweat off your brow. But making that determination, becoming a little stricter on what I'm going to say yes to. Like I said, I'm involved with numerous B-Sides events. I'm involved with DEF CON. I'm involved with the Cyber Patriot program for my son's old high school. I'm their coach there. I work with NCCDC for the judging the competition in San Antonio. I'm DerbyCon. What else? I don't know what else I do. Yeah. I do a lot of stuff. And DEF CON, yeah. And I just took on a new role there too. So it's still hard for me to say no. I need to rein in that volunteer spirit still, and that's still a skill set that I need to find. So hopefully part of this project that I've volunteered for will help me discover some of those skills and bring it back in, because the struggle's real, man. It's really rough.
So for me, I've been volunteering. I was looking at my sort of calendar. I've been volunteering since I was 11 years old. And so I don't know how to say no. And when I mentor people in being part of volunteer organizations, I say, okay, really look at this as a career development opportunity. Rather than just something to put on your resume, really look at what skill set are you looking to work on. Is it better at finance? Is it better at marketing? Don't pick the thing that you're really good at. Pick the thing that you're not really good at. Now, I'm part of a board. Some boards are really great and everyone's rah-rah and we just get together and we do a bake sale. I put on some very large conferences and I work with colleagues, I work with friends, but I have realized that some of the same conflict issues that I have both in my personal life and in my professional life, I also experience in my volunteer life. And I have found that that is a really great play space to work on those skills. I don't want to have this screaming match with my husband, and it's not really great to yell at my staff. I need to figure out how to handle conflict and when two people are butting heads. And I actually had that final aha yesterday when I was part of a board call and I was having the same migraine, the same stress, working with the same person that we've worked together for 3 or 4 years. And I just had to sit down with myself, and rather than wanting to strangle this person, I had to really say, this is only hurting me and the organization that I want to give to. I've got to find it within myself to work through this situation and find a way to solve it, because yelling and screaming is not going to make it better. And I actually found out that when you butt heads with someone, the best way to overcome that is to be the person that doesn't do the butting anymore, and you step back and give the other person room. And once I realized that this person just wanted a little bit more room to share what they were doing, everything went smoothly and I didn't have a migraine, so I was very happy about that. So we have a few more minutes. I thought I'd give each one of the panelists, starting with Yolka, to sort of talk about what are the 1 or 2 things that you've learned from your activities as far as just life skills, and then what's 1 or 2 things that you may have learned for your career. So 2 life skills, 2 career skills.
So one of the big ones is letting go and letting other people do the work, because there is so much to do.
Everyone's going, no. Yeah.
So one of the lines I love, because I get asked a lot of questions, should we do this, should we do that? Should we put men's shirts over here, or should we deal with this fundraiser in this way? With very straightforward questions that the person can probably make a good decision on, and that, you know, they're not going to make a decision that blows things up. One of my favorite lines is, I trust your judgment. And it works wonders with people. It empowers them to go and make decisions. It compliments them because their judgment is good. And then they go off and do amazing things without needing me to be there and do it. It's helped me it's helped me a lot professionally. It's especially something I use at the junior league, but I get to use it at work on occasion too. And then one of the things I love about conference speaking is it puts me in uncomfortable situations. I don't actually like being the center of attention. But I find myself in that position a lot, and it forces me to get more comfortable with it. And it also opens up conferences to be a completely different experience networking-wise. It's a different quality of networking. You've got an in-group that you get to know better, which are the speakers, and you're one of them, so it's very easy to go talk to them. And it gives people something to come talk to you about if they're interested in similar things as you. And it's amazing networking-wise. It also changes the kind of companies that are attracted to you to ones that actually are interested in community involvement and growth of their employees, at least in my experience. It's been something that the companies that come talk to me that I actually like are really enthusiastic about. And so that's a big shift for me there.
So interestingly, I got my current job by attending a conference. So, did anybody else? Yeah, that's very cool. I met the CEO of my current company at Black Hat 2 years ago. Similar to what she just said, learning how to delegate simply because you run out of time. There's only so much time in a day. There's literally more than 24 hours I have found when one rolls into the next. But in also learning to, from a standpoint of humility, take feedback, seek feedback, and specifically seek criticism and seek, just constructive criticism, but look for your mistakes and learn from your mistakes and identify that, and give credit to others, right? So these are things that when you were talking about what if, by the way, that's not a negative thing. It's a proactive thing, and I'm sort of, on one hand, naturally reactive, right? And that's the crisis management, when you're constantly like, oh, but I booked the room, or oh, but I planned the setup of the tables, or oh, the food didn't show up. But I have definitely learned how to be more proactive and how to take that that criticism, if you will.
So Cindy?
Mine kind of run together. Surprise. my personal life and my career choice. My husband says I'm very fortunate that my passion is also my career. They do tend to bleed into one another, so there's that aspect. The first thing I did get out of beginning, when I first started volunteering, when I say I was a fly on the wall at places like DEF CON, I'd been attending DEF CON. DEF CON is in its 26th year coming up. I'd been attending DEF CON since DEF CON 13, but I never talked to anyone. I mean, there was maybe 2 or 3 people that I knew, and if you guys have ever been to a very, very large conference, like upwards, I think at that time there was probably only about 3,000 people, and now it's at, I don't know, tens of thousands. I have no idea how many thousands of people go now. But to not talk to anyone is that's a skill in itself. One of the challenges I made to myself about 9 years ago was to get out, and I am a total introvert. Believe it or not, I go to my room and I close the doors, I turn off my phone, and I just recharge that way. But I was challenging myself to be able to get out there and talk to people. It was really rough, but one of the ways I was able to do it was volunteering, working registration. You're talking to every single person coming through the door. So I learned how to put myself out there in little doses. Didn't feel like a little dose at the time, but that's something I learned, and it was a hugely valuable skill. Now I'm able, because of that, I've transitioned that into my professional life, and when I go to an organization and I'm basically telling them how their information security program is not in the best shape, basically saying your baby's ugly, and doing it from a position of authority and as a subject matter expert, and still being able to maintain a standing of political correctness. That's something that I gained as an evolution of that project. So gaining that confidence in speaking and having confidence in my own opinions, basically. That and the networking, oh my gosh. You starting to speak to people, and all of a sudden networking happens, and you find out, wow, I've got a lot of people who I have a lot in common with, and now I'm being recruited for a job with one of the major players in the cybersecurity space. That's kind of awesome. So, like I said, personal, directly related to the professional life.
So my experience leading an event, a community event like Besides Nova, was definitely one of the biggest thing I could have done for my careers. There's so much you take from it. For me, it was managing, especially a conference. There's a lot of moving parts, and being able to just juggle all that. Yeah, it gives you real life experience. Managing a conference or an event, just like anything else in life, there's different parts. You have the attendees, you have the sponsors, and they'll have different stakes to the conference. They're all coming to look for different things, and you gotta keep that in mind. So for me, I definitely learned, in a sense, project management. That was basically what it was. And I'm recently been offered a position, which is really great, based on what I've done on Besides Nova. Yeah. So, you know, people notice. People notice. It's a lot of work. But when you're done with it, and people come to you with good feedback, and you know it was a community event done by volunteers, you know, sponsored by different organizations, it's definitely a great accomplishment. So I've learned project management. I also learned a lot of leadership skills. You know, you're leading an event. There's people looking up to you to deliver certain things, for feedback, for mentorship, questions. And to me, you know, that is definitely something employers look for, leadership skills. There was also, when I started working on Besides Nova, I had to deal with all kind of organizations, sponsors. And to be honest with you, I did not know how to talk to them. I was like, how am I going to convince them to be sponsors? So it's the experience, and now I'm so comfortable with those kind of conversations. And so in a sense, I've learned a higher level of conversation. I'm just not talking to the analysts. I'm talking to basically C-level executives and things like that, convincing them and having that power of authority and also persuasion, yeah. Absolutely. So there's definitely a lot of things you take on by being in the community and working with the community and bringing something positive to the community, and people eventually look up to you for that. So that's my experience. I've also found purpose in what I do every day, so it's not just a job for me, it's a career, and I have great network. I've met great people. That's another thing too, is you may meet amazing people throughout your journey. And so I'll leave it with that.
So in wrapping up, a lot of us volunteer, but we look at it as a way of giving back, but we don't look at the skills, the technical skills, the managerial skills, or the soft skills that we may be gaining through those experiences, and then applying them to our work life, or applying them to our resumes or our LinkedIn profiles. These are things that we can talk about in our career development, because we are able to share key experiences. You know, I just had a shortfall with one of my events, and I had to rapidly put together a sponsorship plan and a business plan and cutting expenses. I mean, many corporations have to do that, and I had to do it on a $65,000 event and work some things around. So remembering those experiences in your presentations, in your competitions, in your volunteering, writing them down so that if you do go for your next review or you go on an interview, that you actually have these experiences to talk about and share, that there is more to you than what's on your resume. Thank you so much.